Okay, welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack Post Game, where the Grizzlies defeated the Jazz in Memphis, 125 to 103. Jazz bomb away from three and make nearly nothing.
Jazz Smack, your source for information and analysis about the Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Jazz Smack is a community for passionate Utah Jazz NBA fans.
Oh, this is one of those nights again where the Jazz shoot a ton of three-pointers and they just didn't go in. I mean, they took more than 50% of the shots from three, and they made 25% of their three-point attempts. And that makes for a really rough night. It just makes for a rough night from a spectator's perspective. It's just a really difficult game to watch. So from that standpoint, not a lot of positives. And it just seemed, in all honesty, it was just a really difficult night overall. There's really not a lot of standout performances from tonight. The only thing that I can really pick out that was really memorable is Savi had a heck of a finger roll that went probably above the top of the backboard. The degree of difficulty on that shot is absolutely immense, and he was able to make it. So aside from that, just not a lot of memorable things from tonight. It's just a really difficult game.
Yeah, I thought there were some interesting things in this game. I mean, one, Isaiah Collier started. So, what's your takeaway of why do you think that Isaiah and Colin started with Svi, and then Keontae came off the bench? I thought that was interesting. What's your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think he's just trying different combinations, because I don't think he's trying to put Keontae in the doghouse at all, because the guy still played 33 minutes. He was the high minute guy on the team. So even though he didn't start, he still played the most minutes. And tonight, he was the worst player on the floor for the Jazz. I mean, he's 3 for 15 from the field. He had a decent night assisting the basketball with 7 against 1 turnover, but the shooting is just pathetic, and he didn't do a very good job defensively either. So I would say that it's not a reflection of Hardy putting him in the doghouse at all, because if he were in the doghouse, I mean, there's no way he plays 33 minutes with the way he played tonight.
Yeah, this is a guess, right? I don't know. My guess is Hardy really wants to try Keontae George and Isaiah Collier to start. He didn't want to tell Colin that. So his way of testing things is to first use Colin and Isaiah Collier, and then use Keontae and Isaiah Collier. So we're going to see this play out over time to see if I'm right or wrong. But my guess is that's what he's trying to do. I think he's been trying to move Colin to the bench for a long time now, assuming he's not traded, right? Which we don't know. So let's see what happens there. But that's my gut, is that it's hard to bench Colin when he's the better player. But if you let him try first with Isaiah Collier, let's see if he tries to switch it up. Even in the next game, I'd be curious to see. It was a change that you and I have been talking about, you more than me, that Isaiah is the point guard on the team, or the best point guard as of now. And so we've got to play him. Even though he has deficiencies, we've got to play him. So it was interesting to see that he play. I also noted that Keontae had the most minutes, even though he came off the bench. So that could be Hardy trying to appease him, or it could be a sign that, he's just trying to put, this is just a switch up temporarily, which is my gut. But let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, I would be shocked if this continued on for another even 5 games. I just don't see that happening at all. I think he's gonna go right back to Keontae starting, and I think Collier will continue. I think Collier's going to go. I don't know if he's going to always start, but I think that he's going to get more starts than not. for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
That's my feeling on it, because I don't think they can
Yeah.
sit him, just simply because the lack of point guard play on the team. But as far as Keontae starting, yeah, I think he's going to be back in the starting lineup, and Sexton will be coming off the bench.
Yeah. Yeah, and Keontae, interestingly, I looked at the box score after the first quarter, the second quarter, third quarter, etc. Like after the first quarter, even though he came off the bench, he had the most shots. And then I think at halftime, I think it was too that he had the most shots. Now it ended up that Colin had the most shots. I don't know if anybody deserved to have the most shots in this game, except maybe Svi, because they all struggled. I mean, let's face it. And with that, I just wonder if Laurie's back is bugging him, because he's really been struggling from the 3-point line. Over the last 10 games, it's been a big struggle for the guy. He's a fantastic shooter, as we know. Let's face it. Laurie is a fantastic shooter. He doesn't bring the ball down, but he's been struggling. I mean, wide open. Like he threw like some fallaways tonight, which, weren't close, but he seems off, right? And his stats for the year are not terrible. I looked at him during the game, but he just seems off.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. I mean, it's been a mighty struggle. The ball's just not going in. I mean, once in a while he'll have a game here or there where he makes basically everything, but for the most part, it's just been an absolute struggle. So it makes her for some pretty ugly basketball. That's my point of the whole thing. It just makes her some really difficult games to get through without falling asleep.
Well, I mean, I think they're, the positives, I mean, they're still positive, let's face it. Isaiah didn't play terribly. I thought it was really interesting that you start him on Morant. That's a very, very tough matchup, as we know. I think he did a credible job on Morant. He made some mistakes, but 4 of 11, 8 assists. I mean, decent, right? So I thought there were some positives with Isaiah. Svi played, there weren't any shots that Svi didn't like as normal, but he played okay. So I mean, there was it was great to see Bryce back, right? I mean, it was fantastic to see our man Bryce back. He didn't get a ton of minutes, which was interesting, but it was great to see him back on the court.
Yeah, it's interesting that he didn't. Bryce plays 9 minutes, and Harkless plays 22 and a half minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, that is really odd. So I don't know what's behind that either. I mean, I like Harkless's defense, but so Bryce was really hot. He was playing a lot of minutes. He was scoring a ton of points, and now he's back to relegated to playing 8 minutes a game again. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if we get to the meritocracy issue, and we say that Hardy is focusing on defense, I can understand him playing Harkless, right? I mean, look, Harkless is not going to be a star in the league. He's 24 years old, I think. So but so many of our guys don't play any defense at all, that I can see Hardy, like, out of just principle saying, look, this guy's earned it because he's manning up. Now, the odd man out is Bryce, and I don't know if that's fair, right? I mean, I think maybe the point should be that, is it really fair that Bryce is down to that few of minutes for Harkless versus one of the other guys? Because I think Bryce's, shooting has earned him something. But we'll see. I mean, this is one game. Maybe his first game back. Maybe he wanted to ease him in slowly. We'll see. He didn't play particularly well, but he didn't play a lot either, as you said. Do you want to look at the box score?
Yeah, let's take a look. So, as we talked about, Svi played quite a few minutes tonight. I mean, nearly 25, and he shot the ball fairly well. I mean, 4 for 8 from 3, over 50% from the field overall. So, a decent night shooting the ball for him. And like I said, that one finger roll that he made that was one of the more difficult shots I've seen this season. So, I mean, he had a decent night. But then Lowry goes 1 for 8 from 3, 5 for 14 from the field, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and he scores 11 points on 14 shots. And those are not good numbers, and he played 32 minutes as well. So those are just not good numbers. And as a team, the Jazz shot 42% from the field, 25% from 3, and they didn't shoot a lot of free throws either. They shot 16 free throws. So Memphis shot more than about twice as many free throws as the Jazz, and so the Jazz, they shot so poorly from 3, and then they aren't getting to the line as well. Oh, it just kind of compounds itself. But I thought Walker overall had a decent night against, playing against Edey, which is a really difficult matchup for anybody in Walker's situation, where Walker's typically the biggest guy on the floor, and then he's matched up against the biggest guy in the league. I mean, Wemby obviously has a little bit of reach on Edey, but Edey's such a load in terms of just his physical nature. He's just huge. Mm-hmm. So I thought Walker had a decent night against him.
Yeah, I thought Walker as well played good basketball. I mean, not as dominant as he has been. 10 rebounds. I mean, that's still a good rebound total, 2 blocks, but relative to our other players, I think that Walker stood out, and it was tough. I mean, Colin had a really tough night, let's face it. He had a better night than others, but, he struggled. Flip looked good. 20 minutes, Flip looked good.
Yeah.
But those are kind of like our highlights from it, let's face it. And, the interesting thing in playing Memphis is I was rooting for Memphis in prior seasons, and I always thought kind of their, if I could use this word, thuggery image was related to Dillon Brooks. I'm not sure it is. Like, every time I watch this team now, like Ja Morant is getting in it with somebody, like talking smack, getting in it with somebody. Edey seems to do it too. So it's interesting. This is not a team I could root for, frankly, if they were my team, because they're kind of punks, a lot of them. And I'm not taking anything away from Ja Morant. He's incredibly talented, but he just seems to be not, I have a hard time like looking favorably upon him. It's kind of almost like Dillon Brooks, but Bane did it a few times too. So I don't know. What were your thoughts about that?
I found it funny when wannabe tough guy Morant gets into it with wannabe tough guy Keontae. I mean, those two guys are about as imposing physically as the average 16-year-old from one of the wealthy suburbs like Hinsdale. I mean, I'm not going to be any more intimidated by either one of those guys than some 16-year-old kid, random 16-year-old basketball player from Hinsdale, Illinois, which is a very wealthy suburb of Chicago, for those who don't know. Edey. The thing about Edey is, he lived off of bullying people in the paint at Purdue. That's what he was known to do. He just destroyed people in the paint. So and considering his imposing size, and he's still bigger than everybody else in the NBA, I don't foresee that ever changing. I mean, that's kind of his thing at this point. Mm-hmm. But I will give him credit, though, from a skill perspective. I mean, he actually looks comfortable shooting the three-pointer, surprisingly. I mean, It's not like some awkward shot of some other. I mean, he looks a lot better shooting that ball than Jaren Jackson does. I mean, Jaren Jackson's shot is really very awkward and, from a fundamental standpoint, very flawed. But Edey looks good, looks solid. So if Ainge would have got the opportunity to draft him, I mean, that may have actually. I mean, I'm in love with Walker Kessler, so I wouldn't want to see Walker replaced by Edey, and that's the only. And quite frankly, if we would have drafted Edey, that would have been the situation. So, I'm not too disappointed in not getting Edie, but I think there's a good chance Ainge would have actually drafted him had he been available.
Yeah, and I don't know if he would have traded Walker. I mean, it would have been an awkward. Yeah, I agree. Like, how can you play both of them? But I think where the Jazz are, you have to take the best person available. You just have to get the best
Yeah,
player.
I think that's what you should always do. I'll argue that all day long. I don't care what the Jazz needs are. I think you take the best player. You try to accumulate talent.
Well, Edie was projected to be like late in the first round, and honestly, I was really mixed on him, and here's why. One, he came out as a senior, right? He played all year, so that means he's already developed. Two, his defense in college wasn't stellar, and that really worries me when you got a guy that big without stellar defense. But tonight he had 4 blocks, honestly. So it seems like he can hit a 3-point shot, 2 for 3 tonight. He always had skills in the paint, and he's playing defense. So I'd be bullish on him if I were the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, he's looked pretty good, playing. And Jaren Jackson, your point on Jaren Jackson, I looked at his stats to see, because I had heard him saying like, okay, he's a person that could make the All-Star game. He's 33% from three, like 21.5 points, 33% three, 1.8 blocks, I think. So not bad numbers, but they don't stand out to me like, okay, that guy is definitely an all-star based upon that. Now his career average is 33% from three too, so he's just on his career average. But we've talked it. If you're shooting under league average, you probably shouldn't be shooting in the NBA. I mean, what you want to do is have guys that are shooting that shoot above league average, so it leads to winning for your team because you're a better than average, and he's definitely under. So, but it's always interesting to watch this team. I mean, they've done a great job of finding finds like Pippen. Pippen looks pretty good, honestly. Gigi Jackson, another find. So I don't know how they're doing it, but they seem to be doing something right. But I honestly, there are just too many guys on that team, even after Dylan Brooks. I have a hard time rooting for it, honestly. I respect the heck out of John Morant. That guy is good, incredibly athletic.
Yeah, he's the most explosive. Yeah, he's the most explosive athlete in the NBA. I mean, his defense isn't. He doesn't slide his feet particularly well on defense, but he's not bad. But offensively, the athleticism is off the charts. That's obvious. I mean, there's no one else like him in the NBA right now. But yeah, all the off-court issues with that, I think he got into it with some teenage kid in his neighborhood in Memphis, and I mean, it's just like one stupid thing after another, and I mean, it's like he wants to be like some tough guy when he grew up in some suburban middle class neighborhood that he's trying to change his image for whatever reason. I don't know. It's just it's absolutely bizarre. But athletically, he's off the charts.
And why? Like, why try to be like he could be one of the faces of the NBA because he's that. If he stays healthy, he's that good.
Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely from an athleticism and basketball perspective, he should be one of the guys in the NBA that's being marketed as like a top 5 must-see TV. But it's hard to market a guy who's had all these issues with off court and been suspended by the league like more than once for doing stupid stuff. It's just it's really bizarre. His behavior is bizarre.
Yeah, he's not a top 10 player, but he has the skills. He could be a top 10 player. He's that talented. But like you wonder how much he's worked on his 3-point shot. I mean, he hit 2 in a row for Collier. I would have let him take the next one because I don't think anyone's scared of John Morant shooting a 3-point shot, but he is just so talented that he's fun to watch. But man, when he's like mixing it up with your players and you're just like, what the heck, guy? Like, just relax and play basketball. We enjoy watching you play basketball. Like, yeah, you got to have some tough guys on your team. Like, I want tough guys on our team that can stand up to people, but you don't have to try to like pick fights all the time. And I think, Desmond Bane a couple of times, he did it with Colin, and then he did it with Keontae, like a couple of times coming up the court, trying to bump them off. He got mixed it up with Clarkson last year or the year before, right? I mean, it just, and then you add in Edie with that. It just seems like a whole team of guys, and maybe it's reflection of the coach, right? I don't know. That was kind of my thought, is like, where do you think this is coming from? Because this team has it.
It might be carryover from Dylan too.
Yeah,
he's only been gone a year and a half from that situation, so could be a lot of factors in play here.
Well, let's face it. One positive, we lost, so that's another positive. And and the other thing, before we get to like the question of the day, and we'll keep this one shorter than our normal. One other thing is that I was looking at the standings today, and not after tonight, but the standings today, and right now Minnesota is in the play-in spot. Right underneath them is Sacramento, Golden State. Actually, let me look it up really quickly. Who is underneath them? But if we're thinking about, for us, which teams we want Minnesota to go down, right? I mean, that's our goal, to go down, and Sacramento is underneath it. So if I'm thinking, okay, who do I want to trade our players to? Sacramento, like, we want Sacramento to get better because we want them to overtake. So, like, if I'm thinking about John Collins or, Phoenix was the other one. Like, now I'm rooting for, okay, I hope Phoenix does get Jimmy Butler, because that'd be great if they got Jimmy Butler for deal or something, because one, in 2031, they're going to stink, which is good for us. But if they get Jimmy Butler and he plays, they're going to overtake Minnesota probably. Same with Sacramento. If Sacramento upgrades to put Murray on the bench and put Collins in the starting lineup, or Cam Johnson in the starting lineup, that team's better. So I'm now like really watching that to say, boy, that'd be great if those two cross over. So it's let me see who else is under. So Minnesota after tonight is now up to 7th. Phoenix is behind them. Dallas is behind them, but look, they get Luka back. They're better, right? Sacramento is behind them, and Golden State's behind them. I'm not sure if there's hope for Golden State, frankly. They were unwilling to trade during the summer. I don't think they're going to trade all their assets away. But those other teams should be able to overcome Minnesota. So let's watch that over the next, month or so.
Yeah, I think that, there's going to be a lot of changes in those standings. Like, they very well could end up right where they are right now, but there's going to be a lot of jostling for positions as over the second half of the season. A lot of it depends on injuries. There's so many factors going into it, and it's so close that Minnesota could very well fall out of it. Yeah. It's hit or miss.
Yeah, boy, that'd be fun for us if they do. Look, the odds are it's going to be a low lottery pick, but you never know. Atlanta moved up last year to number 1, so you just never know. So I'd love to see them miss. Okay. Anything else on box score? Not a ton of positives.
Yeah, it was just a difficult game. When you shoot that many threes and they don't go in, it's just hard. So it's just going to make it difficult. All right, So let's look at the draft positions. So, do you want to talk about this?
I'll talk about this. So this is just like a quick summary I put together today, that and ultimately the question is, if we're trying to get value back like equivalent value for Colin Sexton and John Collins, if that's our goal, what sort of draft pick should you expect, or where? No, let me restate that. Is if you were gonna, knowing what Sexton and John Collins are, if you were gonna draft those guys, where would you draft them today? Because I think that would be an equivalent of, okay, what should we get back for assets for that? Now, the things that I pointed out that where you just can't look truly at value is if you trade for a draft pick, you get younger, so you have more years of the person. The cash comp goes down, probably, although a number one pick is $10 million a year. And then you have the option value that maybe you get the MVP, right? Unless you trade your guys and you take swings, you're not going to get the guys. So even if we don't get equivalent value back, you've got to have shots on goal to try to hit the home run and find the top 10 player. So there is something besides the value to focus on. And there's a couple of like valuations of picks. The one that I think we should just talk about this time is Locke's value of picks. He came up with it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but let's just assume for argument's sake it's accurate. And so what David has done, I just listened to when he did this last year, is he said, look, an MVP is worth 10 points, a top 20 player is worth 7 points, a top 50 is worth 5 points, a starter is worth 3 points, a rotation player 2 points, and a borderline player 1 point. One thing I want to say about that, these are random numbers that he did, and I think that's one of the things you could say, is this really the best way to do it? Because why does an MVP 10 and a top 27? The other thing I'll say in his numbers is he put Donovan Mitchell as an MVP. I don't think Donovan Mitchell is an MVP.
No.
And I think that there's let's put it this way. Even if Cleveland wins the championship and Donovan's the best player on the team, let's just make that assumption. And he is a starter in the All-Star team this year. Is Donovan Mitchell in the league of LeBron James?
Well, no, he can't. He's not that guy. He
Yeah.
can't carry a team and he can't elevate the play of his teammates. He's
Exactly.
not that guy. I mean, he's not Giannis. He's not that guy.
Yeah. And so there's a few, and I don't know how many, but there's these select group of players that are just on a different plateau. And Donovan is not one of those players. LeBron and Curry and Giannis, right? Or Luka, they're just on a different level. And so it doesn't account for that. But now I'm going to turn it to like the question for you. So based upon David did this for 14 years, he applied his numbers, he applied his analysis of the players. Maybe he used Kevin O'Connor's ringers ranking. I don't know, right? What he came up with. But what he computed is that for draft pick 1.5, you get back a value of 3.9, which means that it's more than a starter, but less than a top 50 player. If you pick 6 through 10, you get back 2.3, which is between a rotation player and a starter. If you go 11 through 15, you get 2.4, also between a rotation player and a starter. And then if you go 16 through 30, you basically get 1.1 to 1.2, which means that every other year you'd get a rotation player. So those are the assumptions for you of what picks are turned into. So now I'm turning the question to you. We have these two assets on the team. We have others. And, I think Svi probably gets traded, et cetera. But what these guys can do. What is Colin Sexton worth based upon this point value? Factoring in the younger, lower cash, et cetera. What is Colin Sexton worth for you? Where you would say, okay, I will make that trade.
The problem is I think the problem that all GMs face when trading for a person like this is they know they know the upside at this point. You know the upside of Colin, and there's always the chance of upside of somebody you draft that it far exceeds both Colin and John Collins. But from a pure value perspective, I think they should be both around 10. So I would expect a draft pick coming back to us between 10 and 15, just based on these numbers, because quite frankly, between 16 and 30, it's a wash. All those picks are basically the same from the last 14 years of what they returned according to Locke's number scale. There's basically no difference between picks 16 and 30.
Yeah, if his numbering is accurate, but we're assuming that we agree with his analysis, and we'll have to separately do our own, because there's a lot of things that David does that you and I don't agree with, but we're assuming for his accuracy for this exercise. I'll say this, and I like Colin a lot more than you like Colin. I think Colin could be a top 50 player. I think his biggest weakness in not getting it is Will Hardy. I think Will Hardy, I want to see Colin on another team, because I think that, and not the Lakers, because then I think LeBron will hold him back. I think that Hardy is really holding Colin back. I think he's a much better player than he shows. But right now on the Jazz, he's a starting level player, right? I mean, he's not a star on the Jazz, but he's a starting level player. So to get a starting level player back, it's not a top 5 pick. You could have a top 5 protected pick. But honestly, isn't it more like in 6 to 15 range? And maybe, as you said, a little lower, because you want kind of the optionality of maybe hitting the superstar.
Yeah. It's the unknown. It's the unknown premium. The unknown versus the known.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think 10 to 15 is realistic value for both of those guys. But with John Collins, the concern we got him for free, like we talked about last podcast, I think any GM that goes out and pays now a high draft pick for that, and that doesn't work out, boy, that's going to make that GM look bad.
Yeah. But we don't know what's going to happen at the deadline, like what picks are going to move, or if firsts are going to move, etc. We're just hearing that firsts are not going to move. Now, as I said before, that could be because none of the teams that want to trade for players have a lot of firsts, which I think there's truth to that. Sacramento has 2 tradable. Lakers have 2 tradable. So they have some, but will they go for first? I don't know, right? None of us know. We're going to have to, February 6th, we're going to find out, like, what's traded. But if the offers that are out there are, we'll trade you a top 20 protected pick, I don't do that. To me, I don't do that. Now, would I do that for Collins? If you gave me some seconds, I may, because, if we have Collins and Colin and Market and playing, we're too good. So there is something to the, moving them so we're worse. But I wouldn't give these guys away. They're just too good. And, the lottery is, the picks are random. I mean, it's hard to, get even starting level players out there. And we got real guys that can play. And, I'd like to see Colin get more minutes than Keontae and see if he can get that average up. I think he can, and let him play more freely. I think we could actually enhance his value.
Yeah, I totally agree that his value could certainly be enhanced from where it is right now. Yeah, absolutely. It could absolutely be increased. So there's no doubt that the minutes he plays and the shots that he gets and all that is hurting his value. And I'm sure Colin's not happy with it either, because he's looking at his next contract, and he could be in much better position to demand big dollars than he is than he is, because his numbers are certainly being held back.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he struggled from the 3-point line tonight, but he's improved his 3-point shot. It's going quicker. I think he could be, if you just let him gun away, I think he could increase his value a lot, but kind of is what it is. That's what I wanted to say on this. I think you and I have similar viewpoints on it, although I think I value Colin more than you do, but they've got to give us something that's interesting, or I hold on to these guys. Honestly, maybe even like sit them down and not play them. I'd almost rather do that and see, than give them away for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to give them away. I think they're too valuable just to be given away.
Okay. Well, that's all I got. All right.
Well, I guess that'll be anything else to say, or is that about it for this evening?
That's about it.
All right, guys. Well, we will call it a night then, and we will talk to everybody after the next game, and possibly before that if we decide to post something about something interesting. There's still some shot charts that I'm actually interested in some passing situations that I've been meaning to talk about. So I very well may post something about that over the next day or so. But anyway, please like, share, and subscribe, and we will talk to everybody at the very least after the next game. Good night, everybody.